Hello and welcome to Etiquette Conversations with EFI and Shirley, where we redefine modern etiquette one conversation at a time. Now, before we dive into today's conversation, I must say that Shirley isn't with us on this episode. And truly, I really miss her because we've been doing this together. Her laughter, her warmth, her wisdom. She brings a wealth of knowledge consistently to our discussions. But I know she's tuning in spirit, and we're already looking forward to having her back as soon as possible. So, before last time, we talked in part one when we were on the topic mastering and navigating office politics with tact. We talked in part one, we had unpacked what office politics is all about, why it exists in different organizations, and how to draw your power map, and knowing who holds influence within the organization and how to go about it. But so today, we will be speaking in part two, we'll talk about navigation. And you remember when we were concluding part one of it, Shirley was supposed to bring her wealth of experience concerning body language and non-body body language and verbal tact in office politics. So, in verbal tact, you want to think of diplomacy in your language. You want to think of your poise, you want to think of your mien and your timing when you're discussing. You want to learn how to read organizational culture, and then you also want to learn about graceful boundary setting. You can, in verbal tact, we talk about things of how to speak gently, how to say no in an office setting where you have office politics, where there's an interplay of office politics. You want to know how to say no. You want to learn timing, measured pace of speaking. You, like we said earlier, tone, it's very important. That's why I said I miss Shirley, because she's a veteran in this area. However, you also want to avoid common communication blunders. You want to avoid sharp tone, as I said earlier. You want to avoid sarcasm. You want to avoid over familiarity in an office setting. So it's so important that we learn office politics. Office politics, you can do politics in the office without poison. Because when many people hear about office politics, they think, oh, it's about manipulation, it's about backstabbing, or it's about power struggles. Sometimes it's not. The truth is, politics is simply a flow of relationships. It is a flow of influence and decision making. And so that's why we said mastering it. Last week, last in our last session a few months ago, we talked about the mastering of office politics. And this time we're going into the navigation proper of office politics. Like I said earlier, you don't have to avoid it completely, because you will risk invisibility if you avoid office politics. If you play it wrong, then you risk your reputation. I say it again. If you avoid office politics, you will risk visibility in the office. And if you play it wrong, you could lose your reputation. So there's a risk of reputation here if you avoid office politics. Let me use this sample of, our term has Sarah. She was brilliant at her job. She didn't need to play politics. She believed that her work will speak for itself. And for a while, I can tell you that it really did speak for itself. She believed in herself. But when the big promotion came up, it would surprise you that Sarah didn't have anyone to mention her name. Sarah didn't have allies. Sarah didn't have visibility. So it wasn't about her competence in the office. It was about her silence in the political space of the office. What's the lesson we want to learn from it? Avoiding politics completely could just cost you opportunities you don't want to miss. So office politics in itself, it's not bad. It's about how you play. That's why the topic is mastering and navigating office politics with tact. So another thing that we must do in navigating office politics is building strategic relationships. To be able to navigate office politics, you must build strategic relationships. Now, in building strategic relationships, you must learn that office politics depends really on your network. You must build alliances up, that's with your superiors, your leaders. Then you must build your alliances sideways, your peers, and then downward, junior colleagues who may hold influence. You remember in our part one, we talked about gatekeepers. I call those junior colleagues gatekeepers. Some of them might not be junior colleagues anyway, but some of them might just be gatekeepers. Probably the personal assistant in the office, in the cadre, you might be higher up than the personal assistant, but he is a gatekeeper. He is your junior subordinate or your junior. However, he is a gatekeeper. So relationships, they are your safety net, and they shield you from office storms. You want to know that and note it, that relationships, they are your safety net, and they shield you every time from the storms of the office. So take an example of two employees who join a new department. One focuses on impressing the boss because he thinks the boss holds the power. The other person spends time getting to know the peers, the juniors, even the admin staff. 6 months later, 6 months down the line, when a conflict arises, the question is, who are your allies? Who has your back? So build relationships even if you don't need them, so that when you need them, they will show up for you. I'll use an example again of probably David and Philip. Let's say David and Philip, they will join the department at the same time. David focuses on his boss, whereas Philip will just be at his desk. He takes time to relate with other people. He builds relationship, even the receptionist. 6 months down the line again, when a major crisis will hit, Femi's network that rallied, or Philip's network that's rallied around him, will make the natural problem solver in the eyes of leadership. But David may not have someone to lean on. All he would have is his boss, and that's one against the whole office. So you want to learn to build relationships. Then you want to also learn that in office politics, words can either build bridges or words can burn those bridges. So you want to master tone. You want to master timing. You want to know when to speak and when you want to hold back. You don't want to fear gossip, but you don't also want to be blind to it. The informal meal. It has been said that the informal meal in the office is also important. We talked about it in part one. There's formal line of communication, there's informal. So don't fear gossip, don't be part of it, but don't be blind to it. Information is currency. You want to use it responsibly. Gossip is also office information, and you want to use it responsibly. I say again, in office politics, please don't fear gossip, but don't be blind to gossip. It is an informal means of information that you gather. You want to use it responsibly. Then also, you want to learn how to disagree respectfully in the office space. You could say something, and Shirley said it just before we closed the last episode. She said you could say, may I suggest. You don't, she said in her words, she said, you don't say I disagree. When you say I disagree, you make the other person alert that you don't support him. But if you use phrases like she said, may I suggest, that's something you could say. I see your point, but, or you could say, I agree with you on this point, but may I suggest. Those are ways that you can disarm rather than provoke. So communication, if you communicate with diplomacy, it would really help you. Say a situation where you just tell somebody it can never work. Oh, he's wrong. And you're just blunt. Some people think that to be blunt is good. To be blunt doesn't make you, doesn't give you marks with the other party. So you want to see the strengths of the plan, but you want to point out that you do not accept it with diplomacy. It is the power of diplomacy in verbal tact is very, very important. Learning how to say no differently. You could also say, oh, may I offer another perspective? You could say, oh, I understand what you're saying. May I offer mine? And you want to use the word opinion. I try not to use the word opinion. You want to use it softly. If you say my view would be better or my perspective, it's better for communication in the office instead of using the word opinion. Another thing is about how we navigate conflict and competition in the office with office politics. Uh, Office politics, I would tell you that it brings friction, clashing ideas, competing ambitions, especially in an office where everyone wants to rise. You must learn to handle conflict privately, not publicly. Defending your ideas, but you can defend your ideas, but try not to humiliate people while you defend your ideas. You want to choose your battles wisely. You don't want to go into every battle that comes into the office. You must read the organization. We talked about it, reading the organization, organizational culture. You must read it. Not every disagreement needs a showdown. You must learn that to be able to navigate office politics. Sometimes grace wins more than confrontation. A lot of people want to step up and say, I am right. Sometimes grace wins the confrontation. So let me use an example of a colleague who takes credit. You have done some job, you have done a job for the office, and your colleague just takes credit for it. Or you have probably shared an idea with your colleague, and then he goes to the meeting and shares it as his. The natural tendency is in the meeting, you just say, but that was my idea. You could just let it slide, and then later, you could go to the colleague and say, oh, I just shared this idea with you a few minutes ago or last week. I'm surprised that you brought it up in the meeting as your own idea. In the future, I would not support this. Please, could you change? You could just talk to him quietly so you can address it diplomatically with your colleague. And then another thing, to set a boundary, I would say that you should discuss it with your superior so that, or your manager, so that it doesn't happen again. So protecting, when you don't bring it up publicly, you're also protecting your reputation while correcting the record. Because the thing is that your superiors, if you correct it openly, your superiors will note that you have corrected someone openly. And remember, everything is about your image. So you don't want to do that. You just tell the person that I noticed you brought up, you shared my idea earlier. Next time, it would mean a lot to me if you acknowledge that I gave you that, I suggested that idea to you, you know. And then, as I said, you want to navigate with tact. So ensure that you say it to your manager and you use very poised words to say it to your manager. Another aspect that we can use in navigating office politics is you can also position yourself for influence. Politics isn't just about survival in the office, it's about positioning yourself meaningfully. You want to take visible projects, but you want to balance your ambition with capacity. There are staff who take ambition and so they play office politics dirty. You don't want to allow your ambition to override your diplomacy and your tact. That's why we're talking about it, navigating it with tact. Share credit. If a colleague has graciously talked about something, you don't bring it up as your own. In this episode, I would always acknowledge Shirley, the particular words she used, which were her original arrangement for this episode. I would always share the credit. I would always say, Shirley said, that's a way of diplomacy. That's a way of positioning yourself for influence. So you want to ensure that people will remember your generosity more than your achievements alone. Strive to be a trusted advisor in the office, the one who is always giving wise input. That's another way to strategically position yourself for influence in the office. So let me use a situation of a young analyst, you know. Now, if you're a young analyst, cross-departmental project, you always offer help. And if you know it, you can call your other colleagues to, okay, let me show you, let me do this. Some people will think, oh, he's trying to show off. But no, he's just trying to tell his teammates that I know this quietly, but we can all do it together. And then when you do it for the whole class, you can let the team take the credit. And sometimes that's why you have team seminars so that teams take credit, no individual takes the credit alone. And then you will consistently deliver without chasing power. You can conveniently position yourself for influence. Another thing that we're going to talk about in navigating office politics with tact again is you must build on your emotional intelligence. Very, very important. Emotional intelligence is your political compass. Um, we call it EQ in for short. It is a game changer in any political setting. Emotional intelligence is a game changer. I will tell you, you want to learn how to read the room. Emotional intelligence helps you, your self awareness, your self regulation, your motivation, your social skills. Emotional intelligence is so important. When you're emotionally intelligent, you will learn how to read the room, you will learn how to listen for tone, you will understand body language, you understand how people use their hands, how they use their eyes. You would learn to understand what is said, and most of all, what is not being said. You emotional intelligence helps you to control yourself, to know your triggers so you don't react poorly. I remember a situation where I and a colleague were supposed to do something, and I was doing my job because I was in learning and development. And the young man was the coordinator of the project. Since I was doing learning and development, I was designing and developing curriculum for the program for different trainers, and he felt threatened of me doing that. And then we had to go meet the we met the organizers of the project, and while they were speaking, he was ranting, he was talking, and I was so calm. I was so calm. I was listening, my body language, because my emotional intelligence was high. I was very calm. At the end of the meeting, when he finished, the organizers of the program didn't even allow me speak. They just, after listening to him, his body language, his verbal tact was low, his body language, his non-verbal tact was also low. And they just told him, okay, thank you very much for the time you have spent in this project. We appreciate you, but please hand over everything to her. I really felt terrible, but after that, after 6 months, I think I got in touch with him and I said, do you know why you lost this program or the project? He had not understood it. I said it had to do with your verbal and your non-verbal tact. It was missing. Your emotional intelligence was low. And I can tell you that today he's a far better person. He's also a trainer. So body language is very, very good. And then finally we're going to be, what's the final one? We're going to be talking again about how to guard your integrity. Your integrity is non-negotiable. The temptation in politics is to compromise your values for quick win. I say it again, the temptation in politics is so that you compromise your values for quick wins. Remember, integrity is your brand. Once you damage your integrity, no title or promotion can fix your integrity. You want to define your red lines. Since you must play in office politics, define your red lines. Know, set your boundaries. What you would never do. Let's use the example of gossip. You never want to be part of gossip, but you are not blind to it. It's an informal information meal. So define your red lines. I will never be part of office gossip. So you want to know what you will never do, even for advancement. What will you never do? So if you are tempted to go gossip with your boss, you are privileged to discuss with your boss. When I was in the financial industry, um, a colleague of mine had stepped up in the ladder and was now management. And because I was in public sector, I needed to be relating with um, the the general manager. And my boss had said, okay, please, I would want to be the one discussing with the GM instead of you. And I agreed. Now, the GM found that I wasn't coming up with ideas like I used to do, no strategic meetings with him. And he said to me, my manager wanted to be presenting these as his. Now, these were ethically wrong. However, he's the manager, and you know the saying, you never win a fight with your boss. But my GM found me too blind. And he said, something is going on that I don't understand. You are not this blind. Your strategies are always very good. What is happening? Even if that could earn me more respect and promotion before him, I never told him who was behind my blindness. I just said, oh, I have some things that are troubling me. And I just made it personal instead of making it look as if someone was behind it. So keep your red lines. In the long term, the people with integrity, that way I've kept the relationship with both persons till date. So in the long term, as I said, the people with integrity become the most trusted persons. So again, I say office politics is not something you opt out of. It's the air inside every organization. But here's the beauty. If you bring tact, if you bring diplomacy, if you bring emotional intelligence, if you bring integrity, if you bring your non-verbal diplomatic language, your verbal diplomatic language. See, you can just transform office politics into an advantage. Office politics is not a storm to fear, but a sea to sail on. You don't just survive office politics, you want to rise above it. So, as you head back to your workplace, the question you want to ask yourself is, which of these scenarios that I have discussed about in this conversations, which feels closest to your experience? And more importantly, how can I respond differently with grace and with more tact? Remember, our topic is mastering and navigating office politics with tact. How can I, now that you're going back to the office, how can I do this better? So in part 3, we'll go further. We'll handle how to manage your superiors upwards, how to influence key decisions, and leave leadership imprint without being political in the negative states. Again, this is Etiquette Conversations with EFI and Shirley, and we welcome you to all our episodes. Thank you very much.